Imagine 8,345 machines. Motorcycles that could tow artillery through Russian mud. Vehicles small enough to fit inside a glider, yet powerful enough to drag a Nebelwerfer rocket launcher. Half motorcycle, half tank. The Germans called it Kettenkrad, chain dog. And when the war ended, the world forgot it ever existed. This is the story of Germany's strangest tracked vehicle. 1940, France has fallen, Britain stands alone, and Wehrmacht's planners face an uncomfortable truth. Their blitzkrieg conquered Europe on wheels and tracks, but they've overlooked something critical. The gap between motorcycle and half-track is too wide. Motorcycles break down in mud. Half-tracks consume too much fuel for simple jobs. They need something in between, something impossible. They need a motorcycle that thinks it's a tank. The requirement lands on the desk of Heinrich Ernst Kniepkamp, the engineering genius behind Germany's half-track program. His challenge seems absurd. Design a vehicle that can traverse swamps, snow, and sand. Make it narrow enough to fit through forest paths. Light enough for 3 men to lift, yet strong enough to tow 1,000 kilograms, and do it all while burning less fuel than a Kubelwagen. Most engineers would call this fantasy. Kniepkamp calls it Tuesday. He begins with a radical concept. Take a motorcycle, cut it in half, replace the rear wheel with a tracked suspension borrowed from his larger half-tracks. Keep the front wheel for steering. The result should combine the agility of a motorcycle with the go-anywhere capability of a tank. On paper, it works. In reality, nobody's ever built anything like it. The design takes shape through 1941. What emerges is mechanical origami. A vehicle barely 3 meters long, 1.2 meters wide. The front looks like a normal motorcycle. Handlebars, forks, single wheel. But behind the rider, where you'd expect a rear wheel, there's a miniature tank suspension. 8 road wheels on each side, 16 total, arranged in pairs on 4 swing arms. A tracked system scaled down to motorcycle size. The engine is pure pragmatism. An Opel Olympia 36 horsepower automobile engine mounted horizontally behind the handlebars. 1.5 liters, 4 cylinders, water-cooled, nothing exotic, nothing that requires specialist tools or rare parts. A mechanic who can fix a car can fix a Kettenkrad. In 1941, that matters more than raw power. The drivetrain reveals German over-engineering at its finest. 3-speed gearbox plus reverse. Power flows to both the front wheel and rear tracks simultaneously. A differential allows the front wheel to steer independently. But here's where it gets clever. At speeds below 15 kilometers per hour, the driver can brake individual tracks to make tight turns, like a proper tracked vehicle. Above that speed, steering uses the motorcycle wheel alone. 1 vehicle, 2 steering systems, both working in harmony. The tracks themselves are masterpieces of simplification. Single pin design, manganese steel links. Each track is only 100 millimeters wide, but together they provide ground pressure lower than a motorcycle tire. The vehicle floats on terrain that would swallow a BMW. Track life in combat conditions averages 3,000 kilometers. Replacement takes 2 men 20 minutes. 3 soldiers operate the standard configuration. Drivers at the front, controlling speed and direction. 2 passengers sit in tandem behind, facing backwards on a padded bench. They can dismount while the vehicle's moving. They can fire weapons from their seats. In theory, they're infantry being transported. In practice, they become part of the machine. load capacity defies the vehicle's size. The rear towing hook accepts standard Wehrmacht fittings. A Kettenkrad can drag a Pak 37mm anti-tank gun across a plowed field. It can pull a single-axle ammunition trailer loaded with artillery shells. It can recover a broken-down motorcycle by simply dragging it. Maximum towing capacity reaches 450 kilograms off-road, double that on roads. But the real genius emerges in special configurations. Engineers develop a cable-laying variant that spools telephone wire while driving. A winch model that can pull itself up impossible slopes. An airborne version stripped of weight until it fits inside a DFS 230 glider. That version weighs just 1,200 kilograms, light enough to land behind enemy lines. Production begins in June 1941 at NSU Werke in Neckarsulm. The timing is deliberate. Operation Barbarossa launches the same month. The invasion of Russia, where German vehicles will face conditions that make France's roads look like autobahns, where mud swallows trucks whole, where winter freezes engines solid. The Kettenkrad isn't designed for conquest, it's designed for survival. NSU converts motorcycle production lines to Kettenkrad assembly. The process is surprisingly conventional, welded tubular frame borrowed from motorcycle practice. Stamped steel components wherever possible. The tracks come from Steyr in Austria, using dies already making parts for larger half-tracks. Maximum parts commonality, minimum new tooling. Early production runs into problems immediately. The front fork cracks under load. The steering linkage bends when drivers turn too aggressively. Track tension systems fail in sand. But NSU fixes each issue within months. Stronger forks, reinforced steering, better tensioners. By autumn 1941, the design stabilizes. Production tempo accelerates through 1942. 500 vehicles, then 800, then over 1,000 per year. NSU assigns the project designation HK 101. Heeres Kraftfahrzeug, Army Motor Vehicle. The Wehrmacht gives it a proper designation, Sonderkraftfahrzeug 2, Special Purpose Vehicle 2, Sd.Kfz 2, the 240th entry in Germany's endless catalogue of military machinery. But soldiers ignore official nomenclature. They call it Kettenkrad, sometimes just Kette. The name sticks because it's perfect. This thing is exactly what it sounds like. A chain dog, loyal, tough, willing to follow you anywhere, no matter how miserable the conditions. By 1943, production peaks at over 2,000 units annually. The vehicle finds its rhythm. Not glamorous, not newsreel worthy, just working, everywhere, in every theater, doing jobs nobody else can do. And that's where the story gets interesting, because once these machines reach the front lines, they become indispensable in ways their designers never imagined. Part 2 continues with combat deployment, comparison to rival vehicles, and why history forgot Germany's strangest tracked motorcycle. The Russian front, winter of 1942. A Kettenkrad crawls through snow that reaches its tracks. Behind it, a rope stretches taut to a stuck Mercedes truck carrying ammunition. The truck's crew tried for an hour to free their vehicle. The Kettenkrad takes 4 minutes. This scene repeats 10,000 times across the Eastern Front. No cameras, no medals, just a small tracked machine doing the impossible because someone has to. Combat deployment reveals the Kettenkrad's true nature. It's not a frontline warrior, it's a logistics miracle. Luftwaffe units use them to tow aircraft on muddy airfields. Artillery batteries employ them to reposition guns under fire. Pioneer units run telephone cables across cratered battlefields while machine guns chatter overhead. Fallschirmjäger paratroopers drop them from the sky to retrieve supply canisters scattered across Dutch polders. The vehicle excels in environments that destroy everything else. North Africa teaches this lesson brutally. Rommel's Afrika Korps receives Kettenkrads in 1942. The desert should kill them. Fine sand clogs air filters. Heat boils cooling systems. Tracks should clog with grit. Instead, the machines thrive. Their narrow tracks don't sink in sand like wider vehicles. The simple Opel engine tolerates dust that chokes complex motorcycle motors. Crews discover they can drive through dunes that stop Halftrack's cold. One unit reports covering 80 kilometers through soft sand while towing a communications trailer. The trip takes 6 hours. A motorcycle would have managed 10 kilometers before bogging down. A truck wouldn't have attempted it. The Kettenkrad just grinds forward, tracks churning, engine droning, covering ground nothing else can reach. The Eastern Front proves even more demanding. Rasputitsa, the season of mud, turns Ukraine into an ocean of black soup. Roads cease to exist. Trucks sink to their axles. Horses struggle through muck. But Kettenkrads keep moving. Their low ground pressure lets them float on surfaces that swallow heavier machines. Partisan hunting units use them to patrol forest paths, too narrow for vehicles, too long for foot patrols. Winter operations showcase unexpected versatility. Troops discover the engine's waste. Heat warms the crew better than open motorcycles. The tracks provide stable gun platforms for rear-facing soldiers. Units modify vehicles with improvised armor shields and machine gun mounts. These aren't authorized upgrades. They're battlefield innovations born from necessity. But how does it compare to Allied equivalents? The answer is simple. There are no equivalents. The British never built anything similar. America's closest attempt is the M29 Weasel, but that's a pure tracked carrier, twice the size, designed years later. The Soviets have nothing comparable in the light utility role. The Kettenkrad occupies a niche nobody else recognizes exists. Against motorcycles, the comparison isn't fair. A BMW R75 is faster on roads, more agile in cities, but put both in a plowed field and the race ends immediately. The motorcycle stops. The Kettenkrad keeps going. In mud, snow, sand, or rubble, there's no contest. The tracked vehicle wins every time. Compared to light trucks like the Kubelwagen, the Kettenkrad trades cargo capacity for terrain capability. A Kubelwagen carries more men and equipment, but it needs roads or at least firm ground. The Kettenkrad goes where roads don't exist. Different tools for different problems. The closest rival is Germany's own larger half-tracks. The Sd.Kfz 10 can tow heavier loads and carry more troops. But it burns 4 times the fuel, requires a trained driver, and can't navigate narrow forest trails. The Kettenkrad fills the gap between motorcycle and half-track perfectly, which was the entire point. Production continues until February 1945. The total reaches 8,345 units. The last machines roll off NSU's assembly lines as American forces approach Neckarsulm. Some Kettenkrads fight in the final defense of Berlin. Most simply run out of fuel and get abandoned. A few escape to the west with retreating units. When peace comes, the victors divide the spoils. France confiscates production equipment and builds its own Kettenkrads for several years. the vehicles find new purpose clearing minefields and servicing remote alpine outposts. Civilian models appear with cargo beds replacing the rear seats. French forestry services used them into the 1960s. But the world moves on. Roads improve. Jeeps flood the surplus market. The unique advantages of a tracked motorcycle matter less when you can drive a four-wheel drive truck anywhere. The specialized engineering that made the Kettenkrad essential in wartime becomes an expensive liability in peace. Parts dry up. Maintenance expertise disappears. By 1970, most surviving examples sit rusting in farmers' fields. Military historians overlook it because it never won a battle. Collectors ignore it because it's not a tank or a fighter plane. It's too specialized to romanticize, too unglamorous to celebrate. The Kettenkrad becomes a footnote. Then not even that. Just another strange machine from a war full of strange machines. Yet 8,000 of them worked, every single day, in every theater, doing jobs nothing else could do. They towed guns through hell. They carried wounded across minefields. They kept armies moving when everything else stopped. And when the war ended, the world forgot them entirely. The Kettenkrad, half motorcycle, half tank, completely forgotten. If you want to see more machines, the history books overlooked, subscribe. Because war's strangest stories hide in the smallest details.